The woman's severed limbs crawled out of the wooden box. Her arms fished a stapler out of the toolbox. The beauty's right cheek was nailed back in place, and her ear returned to the side of her face. Like a child playing with building blocks, she slowly assembled her body. After the woman assembled her torso, she didn't forget the important pieces. Italian sexy goddess Monica Bellucci, Winona Ryder from Dracula, and Jenna Ortega from Wednesday. 3 generations of Hollywood goddesses co-starred in The Weird Sorcerer. In its opening week, it premiered in North America and grossed $110 million at the box office. The story follows 1988's Beetlejuice, with the ghostly girl Lydia. She has now become a mother, and Lydia has her own TV show called Haunted House. Her show specializes in various haunted houses. On this day, Lydia was following the teleprompter script. She was startled by Beetlejuice. Years ago, when Lydia moved into the haunted house, and after her war with the sorcerer, she became entangled with the sorcerer. This situation often occurred. Lydia had to rely on medication to maintain a normal mental state. Her agent and lover was very dissatisfied. They worried that Lydia would become dependent on drugs. Just then, her stepmother sent a text, claiming that Lydia's father was in trouble, and she needed to hurry back to the gallery. Lydia abandoned her work and rushed to the scene, where her stepmother Delia Dietz had recently hosted an exhibition called Human Canvas. Upon entering the exhibition hall, one could see human bodies, and her stepmother was sitting nearby, crying. Lydia asked, "What happened to my father?"
"My father's left me."
He's divorcing you?
What a horrible thought. No, he's dead.
Not long ago, Lydia's father Charles traveled to the Funafuti Atoll to participate in a birdwatching trip. On the return trip, the plane crashed in the South Pacific. After the crash, Charles survived the incident. According to survivors, he clung to the wing to survive. In the next moment, he was bitten in the head by a shark. Fortunately, Lydia quickly accepted the reality. She had to inform her rebellious daughter Aster, but the mother and daughter hadn't seen each other in a long time. Because the Dietz exhibition was cancelled, the graffiti artist she hired left in anger, and he accidentally fell into the sewer. The fall was quite severe for the artist, and the young man fell directly into the underworld. A janitor pointed the way for him, telling the graffiti artist to follow the corridor and take the second door on the right. After the janitor sent off the artist, he rushed to the workroom and filled a bucket with cleaning fluid. He grabbed a floor cleaner and began cleaning the lost and found area. Due to machine leakage, the old man was electrocuted several meters away. He knocked over a few wooden crates, and the severed limbs of a beautiful woman crawled out of the boxes. She used a stapler to reassemble her body. This beautiful witch was the wife of the ghostly sorcerer. Her stunning face adorned with metal staples gave her a gothic appearance. She approached the janitor who had gotten up, lifting him into the air. He demanded to know where the sorcerer was. The janitor refused to answer, and the beautiful witch drained him right there. At this moment, the beautiful witch's husband, the sorcerer, was working at the Afterlife customer service center. Recently, there had been many deaths, and he was very busy with his work.
I just died, and she's already remarried.
Sell the honeymoon package. I'll kill the new husband and I'll possess the ex-wife. Make her do some unseemly things and then I'll post the pics.
A call bell rang from upstairs. Above the service center was the Afterlife police station. Usually, after a person dies, they must register here. The person who summoned the sorcerer was named Wolf Jackson. He belonged to the Major Crimes Unit of the Afterlife. Before his death, Wolf Jackson was a movie actor. Wolf refused to use a stunt double or special effects, and while filming an action scene, he had his head blown off. Wolf became a ghost, and he was an extremely narcissistic ghost. Wolf Jackson was investigating a case. He pulled out a photo of the beautiful witch. The sorcerer felt a rush of panic, but in the next moment, he denied knowing the woman. Wolf led him to the scene of the janitor's death. On the wall were 2 lines painted in large letters: "Beetlejuice is mine." Just to clarify, the terms underworld and weird are interchangeable. Both refer to the sorcerer. At this moment, he boasted to Wolf, "With a handsome guy like me, it's normal to have several lovers. This woman is probably a passionate fan." So the police station need not be surprised. But Wolf was very concerned, because the beautiful witch was a soul-sucking monster. If targeted by her, one would surely die. The scene shifted to a nearby high school. Aster hung up on Lydia's call, not wanting to deal with this irresponsible mother. Angrily, she ran upstairs, when suddenly, a bedsheet flew at her. Students outside burst into laughter.
When you're all in your 3rd kid and 2nd divorce,
We'll see who gets the last laugh.
Aster confronted the girl who played the prank. Feeling dejected, she looked at her father's photo. At the same time, Lydia was still trying to make the call, while Delia was preparing to bring Charles's body back to Winter River for burial. Unexpectedly, the trend of returning to one's hometown was popular abroad as well. Unable to reach Aster by phone, the two women arrived at the school. Delia called out her granddaughter's name from downstairs. Aster felt very embarrassed. She had no choice but to go downstairs to talk to her mother. Upon hearing the news of Charles's death, she felt a bit saddened. After all, her grandfather was the only normal person in the family. Lydia interrupted her daughter's complaints, explaining that we must return to Winter River to clear out the family home, because Delia plans to hold a grief collection memorial exhibition, using her husband's belongings to visually present her feelings of loss in a multimedia format. Aster felt disdain upon hearing this, saying she couldn't go back. She was the representative for the student environmental meeting. Lydia reassured her that it was fine. She had already arranged for her to take leave with the principal.
Oh, I guess when you donate an entire art center, the principal becomes your little puppet on a string.
As soon as she finished speaking, Lydia saw the sorcerer again. Aster wore an annoyed expression towards her mother. Everyone knew she would rather be with ghosts than take time to spend with her daughter. Although Aster was unwilling, she still followed her mother back to Winter River to attend the funeral. After all, she was still young. Aster felt a bit strange. First her father, then her grandfather. Aster was not mentally prepared to accept the loss of those around her, because her mother showed no interest in her father. Aster had no one to confide in. Regarding this, Lydia felt helpless. Her relationship with her husband had long since broken down. Even though Lydia had the ability to see ghosts, she had never seen him. Meanwhile, Charles, who had his head bitten off by a shark, arrived at the dry cleaner in the Underworld. Due to having lost his brain, Charles had no idea where he was. The dry cleaner was in a hurry to close, telling him to go to the waiting area. As soon as Charles left, a voice came from behind the clothes rack. The owner leaned in to take a look, and was grabbed and drained by the beautiful witch. Before leaving, she casually took a dress with her. At this moment, the sorcerer was processing the ghost story of his resurrected ex-wife. Their love had taken place in an era shrouded in death and plague. At that time, the sorcerer was a grave robber, specializing in digging up the graves of the dead. The sorcerer's heart had already fallen into the abyss, barely managing to exist in this world. In such circumstances, the beautiful witch appeared. Back then, she was still called Dolores. The two fell in love at first sight, and soon, they became husband and wife under the night sky. They drank each other's blood, and bit off the heads of a few live chickens. After a night of revelry, the sorcerer learned that his bride was actually the leader of a cult that absorbed souls. In her pursuit of immortality, she needed two things: her husband's life and soul. Although the sorcerer had peculiar tastes, he still had his limits, so the two quickly separated. But now Dolores had returned. She was like a praying mantis, ready to devour her mate. Meanwhile, Lydia and her 3 generations returned to the old house, and it was now the second part of the funeral. Everyone was inside drinking and chatting, taking a moment to mourn the deceased. The agent, eager to rise in status, took on a stepfatherly role in front of Aster, but the little girl ignored him. At this moment, friend Ajen came to visit Delia. Not long ago, she had just married her second husband and adopted a daughter.
Why is your house covered in black fabric?
It's a mourning shroud.
Communicating with artists can be troublesome. Ajen didn't want to listen to Delia's nonsense. She worked at a real estate center, and recently, many people inquired about the house. Thanks to Lydia's show, everyone wanted to buy the legendary original haunted house. Aster resisted the idea of ghosts and expressed her disdain. Aster bluntly stated, only fools would believe in haunted houses. It was clear that Aster was insulting her mother. Lydia hadn't realized yet. When the agent rushed out to grab her, he boldly proposed at the funeral and set the wedding date for 2 days later, on Halloween. He had already discussed it with Father Damien, and the church had an opening in 2 days. Who else would get married on Halloween, if not for people like you? Fortunately, Lydia did not agree to him, but the agent was skilled at manipulating women. He knew very well that Lydia was a soul-broken woman. As long as he acted pitiful and added moral coercion, Lydia would change her mind. As expected, in the next moment, under the agent's encouragement, she changed her mind and agreed to the proposal. Aster left the scene in disappointment. She hopped on her bike and rushed out of town. Aster rode recklessly, almost causing an accident. After crashing through a fence, she headed straight for a tree. Curly-haired Jeremy came down from the treehouse. According to the usual trope, this should lead to a love connection. As expected, the two quickly developed a friendship. The scene shifted underground. Dolores was searching for her ex-husband in the underworld. Meanwhile, Wolf and the others were at the dry cleaner, investigating the scene of the owner's death. They discovered that a wedding dress was missing from the shop. One of the men suggested to first capture the weird sorcerer. After all, Dolores's target was him, but Wolf guessed that the sorcerer had already hidden away. He was hiding at home, and he instructed Bob to change into clothes just like his own.
It serves my decoy. You'd walk in front of me at all times. That way she'd suck your soul while I make mine get away.
At this moment, the sorcerer saw the Afterlife Gazette, publishing Charles's obituary. He instantly felt invigorated. On the other side, Lydia was preparing to clean the house, while Aster went up to the attic alone. She discovered that there was a complete model of the town, and flyers for the weird sorcerer. Aster flipped through the albums in the box, and saw photos of her parents together. Just then, Lydia also arrived in the attic. Aster asked her mother, where did the model come from? She learned that the photos belonged to the original homeowner. As soon as she finished speaking, Lydia spotted the flyer. Her expression changed dramatically. Lydia hurriedly warned her daughter, at any time, do not say the sorcerer's name, and she forbade her daughter from entering the attic. Aster felt confused, not knowing what was wrong with her mother. Aster decided to go find Jeremy to vent. Every family has its own troubles. Jeremy's family situation wasn't great either. Since his father got injured, he had been sitting on the couch watching TV all day. His mother relieved stress by baking in the kitchen. Jeremy's biggest dream was to leave the town, escape this nightmarish home. He envied Aster for having a powerful mother who could travel all around the world. In fact, compared to Lydia, Aster's father enjoyed traveling more, and because of this, he encountered the shipwreck incident. Rescue teams searched the Amazon River for a week, but they didn't find a body. After Charlie's death, Lydia joined a grief support group. There, Lydia met and fell for the agent. Jeremy noticed that Aster seemed a bit sad, so he deliberately changed the subject. Jeremy asked her, what are your plans for Halloween tomorrow? This was exactly what saddened Aster, because Lydia's wedding was scheduled for midnight on Halloween. Upon hearing this, he invited Aster to come over early, so they could celebrate Halloween together. On the other side, Lydia was experiencing symptoms of pre-wedding anxiety, and she frequently saw the weird sorcerer. She felt like she was about to marry the agent. Lydia wanted to share her past story with him. Lydia explained that after moving into this house as a child, a demon had been harassing them. He even tried to force her to marry him, because only then could the demon return to the real world. She thought she had already rid herself of him, but recently, illusions of the sorcerer had been recurring. He even placed flyers in the attic. Lydia didn't know what to do.
Saying that someone called Beetlejuice.
Don't say his name. If you say his name 3 times, he will appear.
The agent didn't believe Lydia's words, thinking that the so-called evil spirits were just illusions caused by her psychological trauma. After saying this, he wanted to help Lydia confront her trauma. He called out the weird sorcerer's name, and in the next moment, the two found themselves inside the town model. As the agent was confused, the ground beneath them suddenly collapsed. They fell into the sorcerer's office. To prevent Lydia from causing trouble, the sorcerer magically sealed her mouth. He aimed to intimidate the agent, warning him not to compete for his wife. The sorcerer opened his belly, and his intestines spilled out. He forced Lydia to give birth to a monster. The agent curled up in the corner, covering his head, unaware that this was just an illusion. Lydia closed her eyes, and silently chanted to return home, and they finally returned to the attic. But the sorcerer still clung to her. The agent didn't know the truth. He thought he had just had a dream. At that time, Delia airlifted a venomous viper, planning to give it to Lydia as a gift, because in ancient Egypt, queens used these for ceremonies, to pray for eternal love. Fortunately, Lydia quickly interrupted her stepmother, deciding to take her daughter and flee Winter River. But Aster had plans with Jeremy, and she didn't want to go back to Manhattan right now. Lydia didn't want her daughter to be disappointed again, so she agreed to stay one more day. Lydia locked the attic door, and even nailed a wooden seal over it. Then, Lydia took her daughter to Jeremy's house, telling her she'd pick her up at 10 o'clock. Jeremy stared at Aster, not realizing who Aster was dressed as.
Marie Curie.
Two-time Nobel Prize-winning French physicist and feminist icon.
Jeremy was good at compliments. As a woman who died of radiation, you look beautiful. As soon as he said this, their relationship advanced further. They truly were like family. Aster, like her mother, had her first love on Halloween. She felt excited inside, as Aster found her feet floating off the ground. It turned out that her boyfriend was a ghost. Her mother said there were ghosts in the world, and it was actually not a lie. Jeremy had been dead for 23 years, 5 months, and 14 days. He was trapped in the yard and couldn't leave. Jeremy could only walk near that tree. Jeremy called out to Aster, who was about to run away. He said, "I really like you, and I want to be with you." Aster replied, "He's dead. What's the use of saying this now?" Jeremy took out the recently deceased handbook, saying he could come back to life, but he needed Aster's help. Jeremy noticed her hesitation, so he threw out a reason that Aster couldn't refuse. If Aster helped him, she could see her father. Meanwhile, Jen was helping Delia with the property sale issues. She was chatting with Lydia, who mentioned that her daughter was out on a date. The boy lived on Jefferson Street. Jen replied, "That street has a murder house. It's at 125. The son of that house, Jeremy, had killed his parents himself 23 years ago. When the police found him, Jeremy was hiding in the treehouse. In the struggle, he fell down and broke his neck, dying. Lydia sensed something was wrong. Her daughter was at 125. By the time Lydia rushed to Jeremy's house, her daughter had already been tricked into the underworld. Lydia picked up the handbook from the table and ran back to her attic. To save Aster, she had to summon the weird sorcerer. She wanted to find out Jeremy's intentions. After reading that page in the handbook, he said, "Your daughter has decided to exchange lives with that boy." Once the formalities were completed, Jeremy could come back, but Aster would be trapped in the underworld forever. The sorcerer stated, "I can help you save your daughter, but you must agree to marry me." Lydia did not hesitate, and immediately agreed. The sorcerer then tossed out a contract, holding Lydia's hand to sign her name. Then, he blew open the door to the underworld, and the sorcerer took Lydia inside. The two went to find Aster. He left Bob to guard the door, but this lackey had no presence. The working ghost fled to the human world, scaring the agent and the child to run in all directions. On the other side, Wolf soon learned that the weird sorcerer had violated Regulation 699, bringing a living person into the underworld. He summoned the Thunder Ghost Squad, ordering them to search for the two suspects. At this moment, a guest arrived in the underworld, Delia. What on earth was happening? The timeline rewound to just a few minutes earlier. Delia had finished signing the contract with Jen and ran to the cemetery to communicate with her husband. She knelt before the grave to perform a ritual, and then she took out the airlifted viper. In the next moment, she was bitten by the venomous creature and died. That night, 3 generations of the family all ended up in the underworld. At this moment, Jeremy was leading Aster to board the one-way soul train. After buying the tickets, Jeremy revealed his true nature. He said, the spell Aster chanted earlier was an agreement to exchange lives. The soul train would head to the afterlife. As soon as he finished speaking, the conductor took Aster away, while Jeremy had to go to window 11 to get a stamp. Before that, the life exchange was only temporary. As Aster was being dragged away, he unexpectedly spotted his father. To his surprise, Charlie had become a civil servant in the underworld. Before they could say much, Aster was shoved onto the soul train. Fortunately, Lydia witnessed this scene. She rushed over to pull her daughter out. The Thunder Ghost Squad discovered their whereabouts, and Charlie followed closely behind. The mother and daughter jumped into the emergency exit, which led to a desert outside. They looked up and could even see Saturn. In their confusion, a black and white sandworm appeared. Lydia grabbed her daughter and ran. The sandworm opened its mouth wide, with a large head on a small body, an eerie blend of harmony. In a moment of crisis, Charlie reached out to pull them to safety. Now the 3 of them were reunited, but the atmosphere was not warm. However, the urgent matter was to retrieve Aster's life. At the same time, Delia was very confused. She had paid to have the viper's fangs removed. How could she have been bitten to death? Delia chanted the sorcerer's name 3 times, successfully summoning him to her side. She asked the sorcerer to help find Charles. He replied that it was no problem, but he needed to first find the runaway bride. At this moment, there was a Dolores in a wedding dress, searching for the whereabouts of the sorcerer, but she only found Bob. Dolores directly drained him, then wiped her mouth and continued her search. On the other side, Lydia's family arrived late. Jeremy had already gotten the stamp. Just when they were feeling hopeless, they discovered that the one stamping was the sorcerer. Jeremy was thrown into the flames by him. Richard seized the opportunity to get his wife and daughter to the exit. The two crawled back to the human world from the cemetery. Lydia rushed to the wedding venue. The guests invited by the agent. She did not recognize a single one. They were all executives from the television station. The agent wanted to let the whole world know about this wedding. But soon, a show stealer appeared. The sorcerer injected the agent with a truth serum, and he spoke his true feelings. The agent was in it for the money. That was why he wanted to marry Lydia. The dead fiancé was also a lie. The agent joined the support group just to deceive women with psychological trauma. Upon hearing this, Lydia punched him away with a fist. The sorcerer didn't want the influencer to disrupt his wedding, so he cast a spell, and all the influencers' phones flipped. Then, everyone was sucked into the screens. A wedding dress appeared on Lydia, and the priest, controlled, began the ceremony. Everyone cooperated with the sorcerer's ideas. The wedding transformed into a musical.
There would be another song for me.
As the wedding seemed unstoppable, Wolf led the Thunder Ghost Squad to the human world. He made a few gestures, instructing the squad to rush into the church. The sorcerer cast a spell to immobilize the troublemakers.
What the f?
And quickly declared, "I am a lone wolf, and not your perfect match." As he spoke, he shoved the agent towards Dolores. Meanwhile, Aster took the opportunity to flip through the handbook and summoned the sandworm with a spell. The sorcerer removed his red cloak, leading the sandworm toward Dolores. After dealing with his ex, he pulled out the marriage contract. The sorcerer demanded Lydia to fulfill the contract, but Aster found a loophole. According to the Afterlife handbook, the sorcerer had violated Regulation 699, so the contract he drafted was invalid. Lydia chanted a spell to send the sorcerer back. As soon as the sorcerer vanished, Wolf and the others regained their freedom, but they intended to take Delia away.
And I'm counting on you to claim a refund.
Those snakes were actually poisonous, weren't they?
Yeah, so I died of embarrassment.
In fact, after Delia's death, her works would certainly appreciate in value, and she could reunite with her husband. In the end, Lydia planned to cancel the Ghost House show so she could raise her daughter. The film ends here. Still in Tim Burton's style, the Underworld segment was very creative. A whimsical and bizarre horror comedy, perfect for Halloween viewing. Although it featured big names, the plot lacked originality. It only had ordinary jokes. If you enjoy my channel, please give me a subscription.